Hi, welcome. Amy Shine here. Today I have a new experiment I want to share with you and invite you all to go on this journey if you want to with me. It's going to be a 90-day experiment called Out of Force and Pressure and Into Pleasure. So it's really testing this way of being in the world, a way of being with your body, a way of being in your life, and a way of also being in your business and with the work you do. And looking at where am I working and doing and living from push and from force, and what would happen if I actually started to live my life from pleasure, right? So how do you know when you're doing force? When you set a target, like say you want to make 10,000 a month or 100,000 a month, whatever the figure is, and the minute you get that target, you've already gone on to the next target. You haven't even stopped to acknowledge and receive and celebrate the target you just hit. That is a clear example of you're in this dysregulated nervous system. You're not even allowing your nervous system to align to this new frequency, this new energy, this new space. You're on to the next thing, right? So it doesn't matter how much you earn. You're earning and your income could be going up, but you're not actually allowing yourself to receive the pleasure from it. You're already in pressure of the next thing. I did this myself, right? I went, when I first moved to America over 10 years ago, I started off working in a restaurant. I was probably making 40,000 in my first year there. And every year I was growing in income. And then I started to create my business. And I started to make say I was making 5,000 a month. I started asking to make 10,000 a month. Now that's doubling your monthly income. That's a lot. It took me a good few years to get there. But I wasn't even at the 10,000 and I was already asking for 15 or 20,000. And then the minute I did get to the 10,000, I wasn't even celebrating it or allowing myself to relax into it. I was already on to the next thing. And this is an example of where you're stuck in this cycle of force, right? Of pressure, next thing, next target. I need to earn more. The minute you earn more, your expenses are already gone up, your lifestyle has already gone up, so you're still under the pressure. You do not get relaxation and calm and ease in your system from the amount of money in your bank account. You get it from getting a sense of safety and relaxation and calm in your own body and system first. So learning how to regulate your nervous system, to find safety and ease in your own system first, is going to take you into such a greater relationship with money and with how you work, right? So we have to work from the inside out. Like the money and the relationship and the things outside of us are never going to bring us pleasure until we first teach ourselves relaxation in our own systems, pleasure in our own systems. So how else do you know that you are stuck in a cycle of force? You're constantly chasing the next thing, right? The next class, the next training, the next holiday, the better car, the bigger house. You're just constantly, like, the minute you get something, you're like onto the next thing. It's just this sense of like there's never enough. No matter how much you grow or how much you expand, it's just never enough. Another great indicator, and I have this one as well, and I'm teaching my system a different way with it, is multitasking. That you can't just relax. A great indicator that your system is dysregulated and you're stuck in a cycle of pressure and force is that you can't just be, right? When you lay down in the evenings or in the day, do you have a podcast on? Do you have to be scrolling on your phone? Do you have to be looking at reels? Do you have to have music on? All that stuff is fine. It's fine to listen to music. It's totally okay to watch podcasts. But are you able to rest with nothing else going on? And if you aren't, that's a sure sign you're dysregulated. I've had that myself. I'm still working through it myself, right? Teaching yourself to be without all these other distractions. It's like your system is overstimulated. And we normalize that, right? In this world, we normalize it. We say, well, I have ADHD and I need multiple things going on at once. And sure, you might have ADHD. However, a lot of that is that because we live in such a stimulated world, we're always like looking for the next thing, the next thing, next thing. We have found safety in the busyness. Basically, we've taught our systems, our nervous systems, that it isn't safe to relax, it isn't safe to be quiet, it isn't safe to be still, and instead we have found safety in overstimulation. We have found safety in chasing the next thing, in constantly having these highs, and in the drama, and in the like intensity, right? And what's familiar is what becomes what's safe. So doesn't necessarily mean it's relaxing and healthy and good for your body and your mind. It's just that it's familiar. So it was so familiar for me to have multiple things running in my business at once. It was so familiar to me to constantly be on my phone, promoting, doing the next thing, growing, like always like about numbers. And that was what was familiar. So that's what became safe to my system. However, it was burning me out, right? So we have to teach our system, teach our nervous system, teach our body, teach our mind that it actually is safe to relax. It's safe to be quiet. It's safe to not have multiple things going on at once. So again, it's like, can I find safety in the pleasure of just laying in my bed without having multiple things going on? And this is a process. Like, I've been going on this journey now for the last 2 years. I burnt out my system. I didn't even know I was burnt out, right? I was really emotional all the time. I was awake in the middle of the night crying. I had left my marriage, which was a good thing because the relationship was no longer healthy for me. However, I had all the grief that I had to deal with in the loss, while also then trying to run a business. My rent, my expenses had doubled because now I was living alone, a single woman. And I was also trying to run my business and keep up with all the expenses in my business, which was a very expensive business at the time. I had a lot of certifications I needed to pay for. So I had to keep up with all that while then also like dealing with the grief and the loss of my relationship. And really my system just got burnt out. And I was finding myself crying at yoga class, crying at night, crying on planes when I was going to the next country to do these classes. And what was happening was I realized like I can't continue like this isn't sustainable. So I started looking for like what's really going on with me. Things like, you know, the energy work I was doing at the time. Yeah, it would make me feel okay and like it would relieve some of that pressure for a little bit, but it wasn't sustainable. I still was going back into that cycle of grief and sadness and pressure, and my life was set up in a way which was just all ran from pressure. Like my business was pressure, my rent was pressure to pay rent, like everything was pressure, right? And it didn't matter. I doubled my income the year I left my husband. That didn't matter. It was still pressure. So I found myself asking for a different way and realizing, okay, like there's something here that I really need to heal. And I actually just by accident found myself stumbling on, it was a friend of mine actually who told me she was going to do this nervous system healings course. And I didn't even know I needed it at the time. I knew I needed something. So I was like, sign me up. And I signed myself up. And honestly, I heard probably like I heard the bare minimum in that course. It was like once a week. It was, my system was so dysregulated at the time, and I had so much trauma going on. My ex was in crisis and he was blaming me for everything. And I'd be on the class and I could barely hear what the teacher was saying. I could barely retain the information, but I was getting pieces. And the pieces I was getting was showing me how dysregulated my nervous system really was. And that was the beginning of me realizing, oh, I can't, like, the way I'm doing it isn't actually working and it's not sustainable. And I started to recognize I was living with anxiety and didn't even know it. Like, I had heart palpitating, like full on anxiety on a daily basis, but because it was so familiar, I didn't even recognize that it was anxiety. It was comfortable. It was safe for me. I was living with it. I didn't even see it as a problem, right? Or I justified it. I talked myself out of it. I said, oh, I'm just aware, or there's lots of energy going on, or I'm changing so much. That's why I'm like this, right? There's so much change going on. And so you can justify anything with your mind. And once I got the information about the dysregulated nervous system, I started to recognize when I was on the computer too much. I started to recognize the anxiety coming. So I started to make small changes, like getting off the computer when the anxiety started. And rather than running off trying to get energy work, I would go out in nature. I would sit with a tree. I would talk to a friend. I would put my legs up the wall. Like, I would do a little bit of breathing. Like, I just started to make very small micro changes in my day. And bit by bit, I start to really teach myself that it was safe to slow down. It was safe to take a break. It was safe to step away from the computer and go outside. And bit by bit, I started to come out of this force and this pressure and started to come more into pleasure, right? And when you've been someone has been on high alert and running your life and your business and your body from pressure, slowing down feels like a threat. Slowing down feels like you're going to die. Slowing down feels like everything is falling apart. And I realized I couldn't also keep doing the business I was doing. And for a long time, I've known that there's something else I wanted to create in the world that wasn't under the company I was involved in. And bit by bit, I started to pull myself out of that and let go of certifications that felt like pressure. It was pressure to try and pay for the trainings. It was pressure to try and keep up. It was pressure trying to always do these classes. And bit by bit, I started pulling myself out of that and looking at what is something like that really brings me pleasure and something that's really what I want to do. And that's when it was really like, okay, the movement was always just so natural for me and so easy and so not pressure. It was always pleasure and embodiment. Like, I just love anything got to do with the body. I've always loved taking care of my body. That's why it was also like interesting. Like, I'm someone who does go to yoga and does do breath work and movement, and I do a lot with my body, and I would go out in nature. So it wasn't like I wasn't taking care of my body, but I was still functioning from this pressure, right? It was still, my life was being run from pressure. My money reality was being run from pressure. My business was being run from pressure. So bit by bit, I started to come out of this pressure. And last year, I started to do just more of like the movement and the things that were pleasure for me. However, I will say that I realize now is like, I really have to change this way of being from the inside out, right? And this is where the 90-day experiment comes in. Because I've had so much, and I'm sure a lot of you have had it too, of this culture of, if I stop, everything will fall apart. And I need to keep going. And I need to keep busy. And I need to have multiple things going on. And this idea that money comes from work and from producing, and that comes from pressure, and I need to have this pressure, otherwise I won't produce. And it's also a very masculine way, because the feminine way of creation is not that way. The feminine is, so when you're in your feminine, creating is from pleasure. It's from this expansion. It's from this ease. Creativity just comes, and it's in waves and inspiration. And I really want to, and I've started to, and now I want to go even further with it. And this is where I'm inviting you all to join me on this journey if you want. Really showing your system and giving yourself evidence that if I release the pressure and I start to choose only from pleasure, will my life fall apart? Will my finances go to shit? Will I stop making money? And the only way you'll know that is if you test this out. So I would say the last year I've been testing it out, and I've been testing out like what happens when I don't have 100 things going on at once. What happens when I do things not from force, but from pleasure. And now I'm actually giving it 3 months. I'm giving it 3 months, 90 days, and I'm testing it out even more, right? Because I did find myself, even though I was changing a lot in the last 2 years, especially the last year, I do still find myself putting myself under pressure to produce, to create, to make money, to make sure I don't spend all the money I already have, to make sure, and it's still coming from this pressure and from this place of fear. So what would happen if for 90 days we test out this experiment? And I'm not going to go live every day, because that's pressure, right? I'm not going to go live for 90 days. However, I'm willing to go do a video at least once a week where I share with you how I'm putting into play this experiment. 90 days where you do nothing from pressure, everything from pleasure, where you don't force yourself to create a new thing or do something to get money in the bank account. You only create from what brings pleasure. You create from inspiration, when you're inspired. I'll give you an example, just a really small example. Yesterday, I'm staying at my friend's Emily's house at the moment, and she said yesterday, like, hey, there's a breathwork session. Do you wanna lay on the bed and do it together? And I was like, yeah, sure. And it was like 10 to 4, and I was going to go live and do this video in this group today to talk about the pleasure experiment. And she's like, the breathwork's at 4, and it was 10 to 4, and I was like, okay. And in my head I thought, oh, I was going to make a video. Let me go make the video really quick, right? And then I will go do the breathwork at 4. And if I'm a few minutes late, it's fine. And I came over to the room and I sat here, and I immediately was like, that's pressure. I don't need to rush the video. I don't need to put pressure myself to make the video. Again, that's the brainwashing I've had, right? That's where my mind is like, we need to rush, we need to force, we need to fit everything in one day. And so I said, no, I'm not going to force this. I'm not going to do this from pressure. I'll do it tomorrow. And I went and did the breathwork session, and I fell asleep within the first 10 minutes. And it was so beautiful. And I woke up and I was so relaxed. Now, had I gone live, done the video, which I could have, and put pressure on myself, by the time I got into lay on the bed for the breathwork, I would already been so dysregulated. I would have been on high alert, and it would have taken me much longer to drop down out of this kind of hyper regulated state, drop down into my body and relax into a breathwork session. It would have taken me much longer. And so it's like this idea that we produce more when we're under pressure, that we do more, that we get more results. It's a total lie. We actually produce and get so much better results from this place of pleasure. And I'm going to test it out because my mind still doesn't totally believe it. And my invitation is, if you want to test it out, join me. So start to notice in your life where you're doing things from pressure, right? Maybe for 90 days, or maybe you just want to give yourself 30 days. You do away with your to-do lists. You stop, maybe just for the next, I'm going to do 90 days. You can do 30 days if you want. You stop planning things. You stop going, okay, I'm going to plan this thing. I'm going to plan this thing. And you start doing things from inspiration, from a place of relaxation, from the idea comes and it feels like pleasure to do it, not pressure. You start noticing when you're rushing to get to dinner, under pressure to cook, under pressure to get to the shop, and you start to relax your system. 90 days, we'll see how it goes. I'm going to invite you to join me if you want. I'm going to go live here once a week and share what I'm going through, the process I'm going through, and even the moments of freak out I have, right? I have no plan right now for income. But I'm not putting a pressure on myself to create something for income. I'm not like, okay, I need to create the money now. I have a few things in place already, but nothing major, right? So what I'm doing is I'm trusting that when the inspiration comes to create something, I'll create it from pleasure, but I'm not forcing myself into creation. I am going to test this out. I'm going to test it out. What would happen if I don't force myself into and pressurize myself into anything right now, and I only choose from relaxation and from pleasure? And I'm going to gather evidence that this works. And I'm going to share along the way the things I come up against. Okay, that is it. Comment below if you have questions about this journey, if you want to join along with me. If you're curious, comment the resistance you have listening to me talk about it, the resistance you have to doing it in your own life, and we can go from there. Okay, bye for now.